The Goose Girl. Once upon a time, a queen and her daughter were living together in the most beautiful castle in the country. The princess had a fairy she loved very much. This fairy always protected her. One day, when the princess reached the age of marriage, she decided to set out to meet the prince of another country. The queen gave her daughter a box of jewels to take with her. If anyone realizes that you are a princess on the way, bad things can happen to you, my dear daughter. So you will be accompanied by my assistant rather than a soldier. The good fairy also had gifts for the princess. She gave her a talking horse named Falada.
Hey, I'm happy to hit the road, my princess.
There is one more thing I want to give you, my princess. The fairy gave the princess a handkerchief. This is a magical handkerchief for my princess. Keep it always with you and use it when you need it. The princess said goodbye and got on Falada, and her assistant was on a donkey. Hours later, the princess, walking along the forest road, was very tired and stopped to get some rest. Oh, I'm so thirsty. We have water with us. Could you please give me some? The assistant girl drank from the water.
Sorry, princess, but I was so thirsty too, so I drank it all. Find yourself another water. I'm not your servant.
The princess was surprised at the servant's lack of respect, but she didn't say anything. They continued on the road. After some time passed, the princess stopped. Royal assistant, could you please get me some water from the fountain, please?
Sorry, princess, but I'm not your maid. I told you. You can get off your horse and get your own water.
The princess and Falada made eye contact.
You know, I'm starting to have second thoughts about this assistant girl. You'd better be careful around her.
The princess got off her horse, and she got down and drank some water with her palm. The magic handkerchief in her pocket suddenly started talking.
Be careful, my princess. This assistant girl is dangerous.
But as the princess bowed down to drink, her magic handkerchief fell into the water. Oh no! Seeing the magic handkerchief flowing in the water, the assistant girl saw her opportunity.
You have no more power left. From now on, I am giving all the orders. You will do exactly what I say. Now, take off the princess clothes and give them to me. If you tell anyone the truth, I'll get you jailed.
The assistant girl did not only wear the princess's clothes, she also got on her horse, Falada, and started to move forward. The real princess, on the other hand, got on the donkey and slowly followed. After a while, they both arrived at the prince's palace. When the prince welcomed them, he thought the assistant girl was a princess and invited her in. But he also noticed the servant girl, who was actually the real princess.
Well, my prince, she's just a servant. She doesn't need to come inside the palace with us. It would be best if you gave her a job and remind her of her place as my servant.
So the prince did so and introduced her to a boy named Conrad, who was the keeper of the geese.
By helping Conrad, you can be a goose shepherd too.
My prince, I have one more request from you. Could you tie up this grumpy horse? Better yet, lock him in chains. He almost threw me off on the way here.
So, the prince summoned an assistant and ordered him to chain the horse to a barn. The assistant girl was trying to make sure her deception stayed a secret and fooled the prince. The real princess was sad and wept that her horse Falada had been chained up. She immediately went to the barn to see him. Poor Falada was just standing there in chains. Oh, Falada, what have they done to you?
If your queen mother had heard what had happened, she would be very upset, my princess.
Sadly, the princess left her horse Falada and started herding geese in the meadow with Conrad. After a while, she sat down on a stone to rest and unfastened the gold hair clips that held her beautiful hair. When Conrad saw these shiny hair clips, he immediately approached the princess's hair and wanted to take them.
Golden hair clips? I want these golden hair clips.
Ah! Leave my hair alone!
Blow, crazy wind, blow fast and straight. Take Conrad's hat and take it away. At that moment, such a crazy wind blew that Conrad's hat flew off his head. After pursuing the hat flying up the mountains, Conrad finally caught his hat. The princess, who had retied her hair, hid her golden hair clips. After herding the geese together until sunset, Conrad and the princess finally returned to the palace. Conrad was immediately before the king.
I don't want to work with the stranger you've given me.
Why, Conrad?
She's crazy. She talks to her horse and is blowing off my hat and making fun of me. She doesn't work at all.
After these words, doubts fell into the mind of the king. The next day, the king followed the princess in secret. The princess first went to the barn and talked to her chained horse, Falada, again. Seeing the horse talking, the king could not believe his eyes. He then went to the meadow where Conrad and the princess were herding the geese, and he hid behind the bush. After a while, he noticed the golden hair clips in the princess's hair. Blow, crazy wind, blow right away. Take Conrad's hat and take it away. After these words of the princess, a very crazy wind started to blow, and the hat flew again. Conrad ran after his hat up to the mountains. Meanwhile, the princess hid her golden hair clips again in her hair. Seeing this, the king was very surprised and secretly returned to the palace immediately. In the evening, the king summoned the princess to his presence. He asked her about her talking horse, Falada, golden hair clips, and the wild wind. At that moment, the princess started to cry. I cannot tell you, Your Highness. If I did, I would go to jail.
Don't be afraid to tell the truth, young girl. Tell me.
The princess told the king everything, one by one, starting from the very beginning.
So, you are the real princess. Don't worry. No harm will come to you. Now go and get ready like a princess.
The king immediately summoned his son, the prince, and told him everything. That same evening, without saying anything to the fake princess, the prince arranged a feast at the palace. The real princess was sitting on one side of the prince, and the fake one on the other. The beauty of the real princess was dazzling. But the fake princess did not recognize her.
Who is this girl? What is she doing at the feast? Where did she find those shiny jewelry? That beautiful dress!
Oh, palace nobles, I have a story for you. Listen to me now.
The king started telling what happened to the princess as if it was someone else's story. In the end, he asked everyone how someone who deceives people with lying should be punished.
The heaviest punishment must be given to that liar, my king. Her feet must be chained, and she must be imprisoned forever.
Is that so? But it is you who are the liar in this story. You have given yourself your own punishment. Soldiers, take this liar out of my presence now.
The assistant girl thus suffered the punishment for ruining the princess's life by lying. The prince proposed to the real princess that night. Then the princess and the prince went to the barn and rescued the talking horse, Falada.
The truth finally came out, my princess. If your queen mother saw this moment, she would cry with happiness.
The princess and the prince have started a new life in which they are very happy now. And the princess's good-hearted fairy was always with them, protecting them from all evil forever.
In the forest, there lived a little girl and her mother. Whenever the little girl left the house, she wore the red hooded cape her grandmother had knitted for her. This is why everyone used to call her Little Red Riding Hood. One New Year's Day, in the kitchen, whilst her mother was preparing for the evening, Little Red Riding Hood approached her mother.
Mother, I'm so happy. It's the new year. Will Grandmother be joining us tonight?
Grandma is ill, darling. Don't think she'll make it tonight. I was just making her some New Year's cookies.
May I take the cookies to my grandmother?
No, my darling. It's too cold. You stay home. I'll go and come back. And I will brew her some herbs so that she gets better as soon as possible.
Please, Mother, please. You have a lot to do here. I'll go and come back before you know it.
Okay, but dress warm, please. The Little Red Riding Hood wore her boots and red cape. She grabbed the basket her mother had prepared and left home. Do not leave the forest's path, and please be home before dark.
Okay, Mother.
It sure was cold out there. The whole forest was covered in snow. The Little Red Riding Hood was walking in the forest with joy. Deep in the forest lived a young hunter. He was after a wolf that would enter the homes of the villagers and steal their food.
I never thought I would be spending New Year's Eve all by myself. But today I will catch you, mighty bad wolf. And because of this, everyone will enter the new year much happier.
Having put all the villagers in fear, the wolf was out in the forest for his prey.
I hate snowy days. Can't find anything to eat.
Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood was on her way. She noticed a baby gazelle in the woods. Poor gazelle was shivering from the cold.
Poor baby gazelle, how cold you look.
Little Red Riding Hood wanted to approach the gazelle and help out. But once the gazelle noticed her, it ran away.
Hey, stop! Don't run away! I'm not going to hurt you. I only want to help.
Little Red Riding Hood followed the gazelle into the forest. Even with its very slim figure, it was so fast. All of a sudden, it disappeared. Little Red Riding Hood continued going after the gazelle for some time, but then thought it was impossible to find it. She had a look around and noticed she was now far from the forest. She was somewhere she had never been before. The snow made it impossible for her to know where she was. She thought by following her footprints she could find her path. She followed the path, but in time the snow covered her trace. Right at that moment, Little Red Riding Hood felt helpless and began to cry.
What will I do now? Hello? Help! Help! Can anybody hear me? Hello?
Somebody heard her all right, but it was no one other than the evil-hearted wolf.
Hello? Is there anybody out there?
The wolf went towards the voice he heard, and soon after saw Little Red Riding Hood. Without scaring her, he approached her. Seeing the wolf in front of her eyes, she was very scared and began to scream.
Help! The wolf is here! Help! Somebody help!
Psst! Don't yell. Don't yell. I'm not going to hurt you. I heard you calling out and I came to help.
Little Red Riding Hood thought that he meant no harm, so she stopped yelling.
Now tell me, what's a girl like you doing in the forest on her own?
I was taking cookies to my ill grandmother, but now I'm lost.
Oh, no human has ever lived here. And where does your ill grandmother live?
Little Red Riding Hood did not want to tell him where her grandmother lived, because she still had her doubts about the wolf.
I can't find grandmother's house from here. If you take me back to the forest path, I could find it there.
Okay, well, come on, follow me.
In the end, the wolf walked and Little Red Riding Hood followed him towards the forest. But the evil wolf had a mighty plan waiting for her.
Once we arrive at the forest path, this little girl will show me where her grandmother lives. That way, I can first eat her, then I can go and eat her grandmother. Now that's what I call a New Year's feast.
After a short walk, the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood found the path.
Yes, here we are. Now do you remember your grandmother's house?
All Little Red Riding Hood wanted to do was to get rid of the wolf at once and hurry up and go to her grandmother.
Thank you. I'll take it from here. Anyhow, it's not that far. It's the red house at the end of the forest.
Right then, Little Red Riding Hood knew she had made a mistake, but it was now too late.
Really?
The wolf opened his mouth, got closer to Little Red Riding Hood, but right at that moment, hearing a rifle, the wolf ran away in a panic. Little Red Riding Hood was relieved and quickly rushed to her grandmother's house. Meanwhile, the hunter was still after the wolf. He vaguely noticed his footprints on the snow.
I know you're here. I'll find you.
After an adventurous trip, at last, she made it to her grandmother's house. She knocked on the door, heard her grandmother's voice from inside.
The door is open, my darling girl. You can come in.
Hearing her grandmother's voice, Little Red Riding Hood was a little surprised.
This voice doesn't sound like grandmother's. It must sound like this because she's ill.
Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and entered. All the curtains were closed. In the dark room was her grandmother in her bed with her blanket pulled up to her chest, just laying there.
Thank you so much for coming, dear. Well, what did you bring me now?
Mother baked amazing cookies. She told me you won't be joining us on New Year's Eve, so I thought I might come and see you.
You did well, darling girl. Come closer so I can see you better.
Little Red Riding Hood got closer to her grandmother's bed. but she had a bad feeling about this.
Closer, my dear, a little closer.
Little Red Riding Hood was now one step closer to her grandmother's bed. Her grandmother looked awkwardly different to her.
Grandmother, what happened? Why are your ears so big?
So that I can hear you better.
And why are your eyes so big?
So that I can see you better.
What about your arms? Why are your arms so big?
So that I can hug you better.
Teeth? Why are your teeth so sharp?
So that I can eat you better.
Suddenly, the wolf jumped out of bed and threw himself onto Little Red Riding Hood.
Come back here. You cannot run away from me.
Little Red Riding Hood got out of the house and began to run away. But the very fast wolf was about to catch her. Just as he was about to jump over her and grab her, he noticed his foot was stuck. And suddenly he found himself hanging from a tree. When Little Red Riding Hood stopped and had a look, she saw that he had been caught in a trap and quickly went over to him.
Tell me, you dirty wolf, where is my grandmother and what have you done to her? Tell me.
He couldn't do anything, don't worry.
Little Red Riding Hood noticed where the voice was coming from and noticed that the hunter was coming after the wolf.
Your grandmother is okay, little girl. She is resting in my shack. When I heard your grandmother was ill, in order to protect her, I took her to my shack, and I prepared a trap for the wolf. Fortunately, we caught him before he could do any harm to you.
Bad wolf. First he broke and entered my grandmother's house. Then he dressed into her clothes and tried to trick me. But I knew there was something strange about this.
Come on, let's go to your grandmother. And as for him, he can hang here throughout New Year's Eve, and I'll take care of him tomorrow.
And so the hunter and Little Red Riding Hood headed towards the hunter's shack. The wolf yelled after them.
Hey, stop! Don't leave me here all by myself!
It was almost night time. Little Red Riding Hood, grandmother, and the hunter arrived at Little Red Riding Hood's house. Her mother was waiting for her in front of their house. When she saw her daughter, she was very happy.
My dear child, where have you been? Mother, it's you! Please tell me what happened.
I will tell you everything, Mother, but first I must apologize. I didn't listen to you, and I left the path in the forest, and you wouldn't believe what happened. I will never ever disobey you again.
Little Red Riding Hood, her mother, grandmother, and the hunter spent the evening together that night, eating, dancing their way into the new year. As for the wolf, this was the worst New Year's evening he had ever had.